we kind of need to get together and realize that we're all the same. We are the ones that we're either going to survive together or we're going to destroy each other together. But how do we get that discussion going?
And we are live. Welcome. My name is Joe Carter. James Dondo and I are hosting this first episode of Things That Matter, where we take on topics aimed at understanding ourselves, each other, and our world so we can navigate more effectively in our own lives and contribute to the community of life we all depend on. James?
Well, my name's James Dondo. I'm Canadian, and I'm tired of the debate. There's got to be more to it than I'm right and you're wrong. There's got to be a point to which and from which all of us people who call ourselves human can get together and move forward. So what we're trying to do is give a platform for people to lay down their ideologies and things they hold dear and talk about how we can put ourselves into a survival mode on this planet and just talk about things that matter.
Yeah, so the topic today is what is a realistic approach to move us forward as a global culture? Because we know there's a lot of ideological value systems that span the full spectrum. Some can get along with others and some not so much. So this is complicated by the fact that the ideologies that some people hold don't agree with their behavioral profiles. So they might have an ideology that speaks peace and love, but they use it as a club. And so as creatures, we're not necessarily aligned with our ideological profiles. So why is that, and is there anything we can do about it? I can start with an introduction of myself, and maybe that's what we could do throughout the room here, and just share with everybody that I am firmly agnostic, and I think having an interest in each other's success is the best foundation for wealth and satisfaction. So I selfishly try to serve that end because I want to live in a better world. I want to pass on a better world to the people I love, my grandkids and all that. So I'm not hiding from the selfish aspect of it. James, you want to take it and then pass the torch?
Sure. Basically, I'm 53 years old. I've been on this planet all of those years. I grew up in a very religious environment and spent most of my years there. As my life goes, I questioned everything, and I found it very difficult to live in those situations. Found myself at a point where I stopped believing it all, and found Google Plus and YouTube and learned a whole bunch of stuff that sometimes I understand and sometimes I don't. But I've listened now for a couple of years, and I've got back into a few hangouts, and to me the topics are all the same. And Helena knows this. I have to know how this is all going to apply to me. Yeah, it's a bit narcissistic, but I need to know how existentialism makes my life any different than doesn't. And I need to know whether I have free will or choice, or I'm a determined being, or any of that makes choice to me personally. So again, I started, as I've been thinking about it, like my world revolves around what I deem as real in my reality. And if everybody is probably mostly like me in many, many ways, their reality consists of what is around them. And at some point, at some base level, there has to be a point we can all agree, this is who we are as humans on this planet. And all that other stuff we layer on top, for whatever reason, we put things on top of the fact that we're human. So I'm not even trying to, Joe and I both want to try and avoid labels. We don't want to use secular humanist. We don't want to use socialist. We don't want to use those terms. We want to see, for me, I want to know how can we as a species move forward as humans? Can we relate to each other and care about each other on a base enough level that what you actually believe, I don't care, because you're on this planet, you're another person, you're another human being. That should be more than enough to move the discussion forward figure out how we can live together. I might be idealistic, and I probably am, and I might be naive, but that's how my brain works, and that's kind of where this all comes from with Joe and I. Go ahead, Bert.
I can pick it up. So I'm Bert Poole. I'm 42, living in the western United States on the West Coast, and I'm an atheist, and with a long Christian past. But I've been an atheist for probably 15 years now, and active in discussion the entire time. Never really walked away from that. And I'd say that along the lines of what James was saying, I have a belief that we as humans have certain shared imperatives, and there are certain beliefs that override some of those, or that there are different cultures and different belief systems where over history, different groups have tried to resolve those things differently, or organize themselves around systems that try to solve those or speak to those differently. And what we're seeing now with globalization a bit is and this has been going on for a long time, is the clashing of these different systems. And I think I was involved in a discussion earlier today on abortion, and somebody was saying, where's the middle ground? You have people who have beliefs in the United States, and then you have people who have other beliefs, and how do they speak to each other? And I think it's through persuasive dialogue. It's through, not necessarily through debate. I don't think debate quite gets you there. I think you have to have deep understanding of other people's positions, really consider them, both sides willing to revise, and it's through that process that over time, and it'll be a long haul, we'll find some common ground and ability. We have to be able to live together, and that's got to be the way that it kind of happens, is through persuasive dialogue, not through imposing, and that people are willing when they have contradictory views, that they're willing to put out their reasons and try to persuade others and be persuaded themselves. So I really think that's kind of the secret to it. So, and I'll go ahead and hand it over to Fabio.
I'm Fabio. I'm from Italy. I'm 50. I've got a couple of kids, a wife, a couple of German shepherds. I'm an IT professional, and I'm fascinated by people. That's the main reason, I engage in this kind of discussion. I mean, so the topic to me is not really that important. I mean, it's a nice thing if we talk about interesting things. But I always thought that you can really grow and question yourself by listening to people which might or might not have the same age as you have, but they definitely have different experience. I'm positive by the fact that experiences shape yourself. So I'm always been fascinated by how people work, even because of my job. And I mean, it is fascinating just sometimes to figure out how just the brain of different persons figure out different solutions to the very same problem. And I think that's one big issue of today's times. So I'll let it to Cliff.
I'm Cliff. I live in Newfoundland. I think one of the interesting things that comes about quite easily when you're on Google Plus Hangouts for any length of time is that people are very easy to say what they believe, what they feel, what they know, but there's very little methodology and for people to resolve when these clash with someone else. And I think an interesting question might be, you can look at a field which has a very well-developed method for solving this, which is empiricism in science. So when two people have clashes over ideas, there is a method for how this is resolved. It's a non-violent method, and it involves a very specific list of techniques which have been worked on consistently for quite some time. And I think maybe an interesting question is, why can't we look at some of the methodology involved in there to see how we can answer questions or methods in other areas when we again enter a conflict between people that have a difference in belief in maybe ideologies or anything beyond empirical questions.
those are all interesting perspectives. I'm wondering if we can maybe start out with tackling the fact that there are a lot of people that believe a lot of different things. Different people get exposed to different cultures throughout the world, and they pick up the flavor of not only the ideas and words that float around them, but they pick up also the behavioral profile of the people in their cultures. They learn how people relate to each other through their developmental environment and what they're exposed to. So is it really fair to expect that everyone would agree to a single dynamic, or is that an unrealistic expectation?
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest that we tell people you need to adopt scientific methodology, because essentially what you're doing then is telling someone how they need to think. I think what we can do is ask questions like, why does science actually work? Why does it actually produce knowledge? How come people with radically different viewpoints in scientific concerns can come together and work these things out? And one of the fundamental things that's quite obvious when you get involved in a field is that one of the reasons why the issues are resolved is because both parties don't simply state what they know. They state why they know it. They state the concerns that they have, and each party explores the other party's side to try to come to an understanding of why they know the things that they know. And I think that's critical. So as a fundamental starting point, I wouldn't tell someone, okay, look, this is what you want to believe. I would ask that person, why do you believe that? What's the value in you believing that? And if I can come to an understanding of what they believe, and I can show them that I've come to that understanding of what they believe, most people then will be at least somewhat interested in hearing what you believe. And I think someone has to be the bigger person and has to take the first step and open up the line of dialogue.
Anybody else have thoughts on that? Where do we start?
I think the tricky part is that you have people who are there's different attitudes throughout the debate, right, or throughout these different groups, and I'm talking about either when you're talking about whether you're talking across nations or within the Google Plus community discussing things. You have some who are genuinely interested in who are interested in revision and the process of engagement, whereby they can be persuasive and be persuaded. But you also have people who are so dug in and entrenched in certain of their positions that all they're doing is selling, right? And so long as I think you have conditions like that, it makes it really tricky. I don't know that you'll ever have a global culture where there is a unified methodology to beliefs or standard underlying group that we do have some of that already, but you have wildly different when it comes to, say, morality or religious belief or other aspects. We have some basics, like all of us know that food is good to eat, right? There's like really primitive things that we can all agree on, but some of the other things, it's thick and tricky ground, and so what I think is a good first step is fostering what you want to see, right? If you want to see actualized, if what you want to see actualized is dialogue conducive to truth, you have to be interested in it yourself and try to foster those types of dialogues.
Yeah, that can be difficult. I think it's fair to say with some people that hold ideologies that are just not open to being questioned or challenged in any way, shape, or form. So how would you propose that you reach the harder core, or are you suggesting that we go for the more, I guess, moderate, like people that have openings that you could actually have a discussion and dialogue with?
It might be a little bit along the lines of what Cliff is talking about science, and in terms of not advocating the that as for something for people to take on board, but rather having a discussion about why that works and looking at the underlying process. And I think that's actually a good way to start. I think actually for myself, it wasn't that I got a set of right beliefs at some point. It's that I developed better methodologies and realized that they were giving me better results. And so it's trying to foster that. So it might be, as Cliff's saying, having those discussions about what are we even concerning ourselves when we talk about beliefs, or we talk about knowledge, and what's the best way to actually get at that.
So for me, if we're looking for a systematic way where we can begin to build bridges between people of differing views, you first approach people who already want to build bridges. Then you get yourself to the point where you understand where they are coming from. And from that understanding, through word of mouth or other sort of uncontrolled or uncontrollable means, word will spread, and more people will come to you. And so the people that are on the other side, if you will talk to people who are even more on the other side about your side, and so they will come that way. I don't think that you can really grab anybody. You've got to arrange things so that they want to come.
I think what I'm talking about isn't is there a something, anything that we can all understand, that we don't need to convince anybody of? Like, I'm a human being, I live on planet Earth. Can we not start a discussion from that? Like, all this other stuff is really nice, but we have to come to a point where there's got to be a base to start with, that we don't have to discuss. You really are a human. Like, I'm not trying to. You should just know I'm a human being. And how do we move from that point? Does that make? Because all this other stuff is, to me, it sounds like we're 2 steps ahead of where I'm talking about. Like, is there something where we can just say, you know what, we're humans. We kind of need to get together and realize that we're all the same. We are the ones that we're either going to survive together or we're going to destroy each other together. Like, how do we get that discussion going?
Well, the problem is that is something that is polluted by the beliefs that are layer on top of that, right? Yeah. And so it's not. I mean, if I try to have a constructive dialogue with a member of ISIS regarding the value of human life, well, that doesn't necessarily interest them, depending on the life, right? And within the great debate, actually, if we took that abortion discussion that I was having with someone, we have very different views on what is a person, right? And so, what constitutes a person? And so it's until there is people are persuaded out of other positions, I'm not going to get a lot of traction there on why I might have different beliefs concerning abortion, when it's rooted in a valuing of personhood and what constitutes that. And so, unfortunately, as much as we want to get to the base level where we just care about preserving the lives of other humans or wanting well-being for each other, we have a whole lot of propositional content to kind of wade through to try to clear the clutter, essentially, to get to that point where we can have that type of compassion.
I think there is a difference here. We got to make up our minds if we're talking about having a dialogue or building bridges. I can have a dialogue with someone which doesn't think the way I think on any subject, and we can have a really nice dialogue where everybody, remains of the same idea. I listen, the way you think, you listen the way I think. We're still thinking that, the way each other is thinking is the best one. So we're just having a nice conversation, which is good. It's civil, it helps, growing, because, eventually you think about it, but that's a conversation. If you want to build bridges, I think that the first thing that you have to put your mind up is that you will eventually have to give up something. That will be the only way, and you must be positive before the process of building bridges will begin, that you will get more than what you give up, because that will be the value of building bridges. And again, you might give up something a little bit, but unless you put yourself in a situation where you say, okay, I think that finding a common ground on something that we don't agree is more important than each of us, ideas, the single ideas, and we eventually got to go there. I cannot possibly expect that you will, drop everything or most of the things that you believe and come to my side. A bridge is something which is between two sides, and we eventually meet in the middle. So, I think that this sometimes is not that easy. Bert said before that we all agree on some things, and he made the example, that food is good to eat, and he's right. He's totally right. But there are some instances where even that is not true. And it is difficult, because if you think, okay, oh, bloody hell, me, you should agree with me that eating food is good. How can I ever find a common ground with you? Well, eventually you got, to get to a point that you might want to say, yeah, even if I don't think so, I can see that, eating that kind of food is not that good.
So what's interesting for me about one of the things that you've said is that you seem to have pointed out a distinction here, and that is sort of when you're describing what you were calling building bridges, it's more of a real life situation, like what real politicians with actual power do and must do in order to come to agreements that result in legal documents and things like that. So that's a different issue than people on G+ and Hangouts and things like that. So I guess it's going to depend a lot on your goal and obviously how much power you actually have and what it is that you can do and how to go about approaching it.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. I don't think, honestly, too many discussion on G+ as discussion, which their goal is building bridge. Most of the times there are, some of them are polite, some of them are not, some of them are civil or not, but everybody is giving up their the viewpoint or whatever with various justifications, if there are, and that's pretty much it, And this is why, for example, I agree with James, what James said before, and I think Bert is on the same page here, if I'm not mistaken. You get bored of those discussions pretty fast. After a year or so, I mean, you want to drive your head to the wall because the arguments are still the same, and nobody's making a bloody step ahead or backwards or sideways.
How do you know that?
I know that because, yeah, I do.
Exactly. But I mean, we've listened to that for a year and a half now. Like, how do you know that? Well, fuck, I know it.
I do. Yeah, deal with it.
Can I bring up about bridge building? Is I would say there's if we're talking about taking on meeting somewhere in the middle in terms of taking on some of each other's propositions. I don't think that's when I'm talking about bridge building. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about creating an environment for dialogue where there's earnestness on both sides that's appreciated and understood, and that both are open to revision. And it's a building of goodwill through honesty, right? It's through being respectful, taking on people's full positions before you critique it, being fair to it, not straw manning, and that to me is setting the conditions, because I can't be persuaded of someone else's beliefs if I'm not persuaded. So if I'm approaching the topic of bridge building as if we can somehow meet in the middle on beliefs, well, that's probably not going to work. But what we can do is we can create an environment where we're both searching, we're both banging ideas off of each other, and inevitably, if you have two people doing that, you're going to get closer to the truth. Both are going to get closer to the truth. And I think that's the way, hopefully, we coalesce a little bit closer to the middle.
I think there's something to that, and in addition, if that's what we really think about, then we really can't confine that just to sort of what we do here in these hangouts, right? Since none of us have any actual power. So I think that's a good start to look at. But I don't think that that's that hard, to be honest. I think that if you show that you are genuinely trying to understand where someone's coming from, and you express what you think is different about what they say in a way that is charitable, that is genuine and honest, they're going to see that that's where you're coming from, and they're going to react to you in the same way. It doesn't seem all that hard, is
Right.
what I'm getting at.
I think it's not hard if you
What I'm trying to say, like with Helen, what Helen is saying is, as little kids, we live like that. We learn to live with each other. We learn to get along, and we're taught how to hate. We're taught that they don't belong to our group. We're taught that stuff. This isn't something that's inbred. You're conditioned to accept or reject somebody based on whatever your training you've been taught, on whatever training you accept as reality. When I put away my theology and put away my belief system that taught me to hate these people, I started to understand that I had a different place in the world just as who I am, that I could make a difference and I could just value people for who they were without caring what they believed. And this is, Cliff, could you explain what that comment means? I don't know what that means. That I don't see why that seems to negate claims to equality. What are you meaning by that?
Well, if we start off, this is one of these weird things. It's a mathematical thing. You can't use a set to talk about itself in the negative. You'll end up with like weird contradictions, and that's sort of what comes out of this. But basically, if you say we all need to have the same foundation, well, then you're denying people's right to have whatever foundation that they want. Like, as an example, my wife is a devout Hindu. She's about as opposite from me as I could think in terms of any way, any kind of base foundation, the way she approaches things, the way she thinks.
Would she agree that she's a human?
She would agree that she's a human, yes, but she wouldn't agree that there's equality among humans.
Well, I'm not asking about equality. I'm not asking about any of that rate. I'm just saying, if we can get people to agree that we're all human beings,
yeah, that's what
a
I'm
starting
saying.
place.
Right, but like, not everyone is probably going to agree that they are human.
Yes.
Right? But they're not going to agree that everyone else is.
I'm not sure.
Dehumanize, that's a really good point, because dehumanization is one of the mainstays of the way that we pump ourselves up to actually, we execute people based on a rejection of their humanity. And so I am thinking that there has to be, from my perspective, somewhere we can start. Is it going to reach everybody? No, I don't think that's a realistic expectation. But there are people out there that I think would have enough of a shared value, and that's how communities build, based on shared values. And so what is it that we would be looking for? We would be looking for people with at least a baseline recognition that we all swim in the same pond, I think. And I also think that ideology isn't the way to get somebody convinced. I've heard a lot of people argue back and forth ideas and not agree on the color of shite. But I do think that the basic way that you treat people is something that is communicable. If I see somebody that holds a door for me or lets me in traffic or some just tangible way, then there's a shared humanity with that, and that's behavioral. It's not ideological. I think that's our greatest power, and I think we all have that. And that might be cliche to say that actions speak louder than words, but there are ways that we can cultivate our actions so that they do have a power and influence, and maybe not in ways that could be marked off on a checklist, but certainly in ways that we can't even measure their tangible effects and splash damage in a good way, that they travel outward. So
it sounds like you may have some ideas about that. What have you come up with so far?
Well, okay, so I think that paying it forward is a good idea. Find somebody and just pay their coffee forward. Somebody that you see that might have some sadness on it. Open the door for them, or give them a smile, or let them in, just like I was talking about, or find somebody in in a neighborhood that's down economically or whatever. Just pay for their groceries if you can afford to do that or whatever. And I know they're just simplistic ideas, but the point being that we can actually affect some behavioral communication about each other's humanity that I think goes a lot further than the words we transmit, because frankly most of us walk around with a set of ideas that don't agree with the way we behave. And so I think if we started focusing on our behavior, we'd be in better shape.
Now, let me play with this thought. If we can't get to a place where we can agree without ideology, if we can just agree on a basal premise that we are together, we are one group. As this world gets smaller and smaller, the delineation between ethnicities, ethnic groups, and cultures gets smaller and smaller. Is there a place where we can see that we're backing into each other? Is that some way starting point to get us to start looking beyond these things to, maybe we aren't just this group or that group. Maybe we are in this as a group together.
I'm sorry, I've probably been a pain in the ass, but I really don't understand why we should find a common ground. What if we don't? Do we just, stop talking to each other and fuck all? We just give up? What the hell is going on? I mean, Cliff said before. I don't know if it's your spouse or your fiancé or your wife. I don't know, but she has, in some aspects, she has completely different ideas from what he has. Does it mean that he hasn't married her? Fuck no. He's married her, and they're probably the most happy couple they are. I can talk about my wife. We disagree on so many stuff that is going to be bloody unbelievable. But so what? Sometimes the fact that we put pressure on the fact, before we start talking, we got to find a common ground. No, the common ground is that we are willing to start talking, okay? And that's a dialogue. Now, do we want to work towards a common goal? Okay, this is where we have to agree on the goal. But again, we might not agree on the method. So if the discussion gets into the method, it might be a little bit, tricky and dangerous, because we might get lost. We might lose focus to the goal. I think we really have to make up our mind here of why do we really engage in conversation with people.
I have practical instances here in America where we have a gun debate and we have Planned Parenthood and abortion debate going on right now. And in America, what I've noticed, especially over the last 5 to 8 years, is there are conservative Christians who are feeling very strongly that they are losing their country. And in all honesty, they are. They have certain strong convictions that they hold to, and they are not getting their way anymore. And it's painful. I have friends who are genuinely pained, they see America completely differently than I do right now, where I see gay marriage getting passed in June, July, and I'm thrilled. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is progress of a sort. For them, this is a downward slide. And honestly, on the gun debate, half of the problem is that we cannot. There's such a polarization and conversations not occurring. Rational conversation about empirical results, like how can we reduce gun deaths in a sensible way, and how can we find and that requires persuading people out of certain positions where they're deeply entrenched. And I was actually going to bring this up because I think this speaks to dogmatism. I think dogmatism across the board, both on atheists, in Christian dogmatists, anywhere where you are so dug in on an ideal that you worship the ideal or the idea rather than being open to revision, letting your beliefs be revised, and having well-warranted beliefs. Dogmatism is the opposite of that. I think that pollutes everything and makes it very, very difficult. And I think that would be a common goal, perhaps only because we all don't like each other's dogma. So maybe removing dogmatism could be a step. But of course, everyone loves their own dogmas. So
that's true. We do.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know how to do this, but I think minimizing the use of ideas as a currency and ramping up the significance of behaviors, again, is the key to making any kind of a significant change. And to tap into, if I understood Fabio's point about common grounds, I think that the stakes are pretty high for us to begin to find ways to not only cooperate with each other but have each other's backs, because when there's a meltdown in Fukushima, we are swimming in the same pond, and we have to find ways with 7 billion of us on the planet to get along. I do think that it's pretty important to recognize that if we have a vested interest in each other's success, that the world could be a better place. But even beyond that, if we don't have a vested interest in each other's success, we will experience quite a hard knock from the tragedy of the commons, because the way that biological systems work is one more little piece of hay and boom, the whole system collapses. Like somebody had asked, how did Chicago go broke? It was gradually, all of a sudden. And that's just the way these kind of things work. So I think that from that perspective alone, we need to ramp up the urgency of our willingness and our focus on cooperation. These are not easy things that we're talking about, but they certainly are necessary.
I was going to bring up, I think I wanted to bring up was that earlier it was being mentioned about the butting up against of people. I think a lot of these beliefs obviously have existed for a long time, or there's been a lot of difference of opinion, but I think social media has really opened up the conversation. Like, I think people are much, for instance, I have like 500 friends on my Facebook, many of whom are old high school friends or childhood friends, and we have very intimate discussions about core beliefs to all of us, and they're not engaged in Google Plus or anything. They're just regular people, and who may not have had, like, I don't know that I think my parents probably had those discussions sometimes. They'd have somebody over or whatever, but I think the world got a lot smaller. So I have a little bit of hope that all of the intermixing that's going on, the mingling of ideas on the internet, as much as there are bad sources of data that entrench people on the internet, I think the social media helps to work through some of that, brings people out of their shells, allows them to express an opinion. Some people are anonymous on G+, who go by a name we don't know much about otherwise, but they're willing to put their beliefs out there as a result. And I think I have hope that this is helping the process of at least dulling some of the corners, or maybe taking the edge off of some of the harsh positions people would have had in the past.
I agree completely. I mean, it's like my kids, like, I've got 3 kids in their 20s, and they can't imagine the world I grew up in, where I lived here, they lived there, and everything else was over there. Now everything is here. I have the whole world right here. I don't understand why we've grown up, my generation has grown up so stuck to what they've accepted their whole life without thinking. And now the kids are asking these questions, and we don't have answers for them. We just don't. So they're having to find out answers for themselves. And that's a scary position, because as the elders, per se, we should have answers for our kids as to, why the hell are you guys destroying the planet? Like, we don't have an answer for that, because we want to make more money. That's not an answer. It's a belief system. And we need to stop that. We need to see these kids as valuable and go forward from there. I'm just ranting now.
No, you're right. The problem is that we probably should stop talking and start doing shit. But the fact of the matter is that you have to have the balls to go to those kids and say, you know what, we fucked it up, and right now to fix shit, you're gonna pay gas $7 a gallon. There you go. We got to start doing that kind of things. I'm pissed off and tired of talking about stuff. I don't care about people, if they believe the same things I do, if they agree with me on stuff. I don't care. I want to work towards goals.
Right.
Okay.
That's
I'm not.
100%.
I'm not here to talk with people and telling them about my justification for my beliefs, why I am a socialist or whatever the hell. I don't care, because those are not the people that will make an impact on my beliefs in my life. The thing I can do is talk with Bert, which lives in Southern California. The things I can do is talk with Cliff, which lives in Europe like me. And we had got to try to, I want to have an exchange with them on how we can do stuff. And we got to put in our mind that doing stuff is painful. It's going to cost us time, it's going to cost us lives, but it's one thing. I mean, I can get blue in the face about talking things, okay? It will drive us nowhere. We need a set of people that they meet each other, they talk about things, and then they go outside and do shit.
Yeah, that's it. I can't.
So that's why, and it probably was a little bit, I understand I might be really a prick, but that's why before I said that I don't really, I don't really care about people, talking about things, and the fact that we have to spend a lot of time, finding a common ground. I don't care. I've got to do shit, okay? And that's a goal. We got a goal we got to achieve. We agree we got to achieve that goal. We got to reduce, pollution. Okay, we got to do that. And I know that in order to do that, I will have to sacrifice my life. I will have to spend a lot more money. I will go less on vacation. We got to pay for that stuff. We haven't paid for that, before. I mean, someone has got to pay. It's going to be my kids. And eventually it's going to be me. I haven't got, I've got 200 or 300 years to live, of course, but, I already, wasted 50 years. So, I don't know. I mean, sometimes I feel really powerless, talking about that stuff. And I get frustrated when try to find a common ground. Fuck the common ground. I mean, the common ground is the one you sit in your ass right now, right here. You don't need as much as a common ground of that one.
So doing shit, I think, is different than hangouts, right? And I think that obviously each individual person can't do all the shit. So you got to pick the shit that you're going to do, right? And I've got shit that I do that is really would count as doing shit. But it's in a specific area. I actually have 2 shit areas where I do things.
Why does it sound so sexy when you swear so much?
But so I think in the real life, there is the thing that Joe was mentioning about just behaving on an individual level to spread sort of emotional bridges. And then there's the stuff that Fabio was talking about, where if you want to really get things done, you've got to take, I think, is already the map is kind of laid out already. You just have to get on the map and follow the sort of traditional activist type roadmap. So you pick the shit that you want to do shit about, and I've got 2 of them. I do a lot of shit. So is there some other way? When I'm doing the shit, you're right. I can't be bothered with the people who think the shit I'm doing is useless. So it's a different kind of situation. The scenarios are completely different from one another.
Well, it might be or it might be not. I mean, I'm interested in knowing what is the kind of shit that you do. Because there might be some shit that you do that might apply to the shit I'm in.
So I do LGBT rights shit for my daughter.
There you go.
And I do autism-related shit, both socially and towards intervention. Those are my 2 shit areas.
Yeah,
I don't think that they probably don't intermingle with like gasoline shit, but I appreciate that you're there doing it.
I don't know that I would take a shit on dialogue entirely. I think that there's value to getting out and doing stuff. In America, when certainly votes matter, and persuasion, like persuading people on gay rights, the last 7-8 years has been really, really important in moving the country. And it moved pretty quickly. And I think a lot of that is social media, a lot of that's media on TV, but a lot of it's just dialogue like this. My kids grew up in a very different time. My kids going to high school had gay friends. They had friends who walked across the courtyard with holding hands with their partner. They have friends who have gay parents. And so I think, but they're involved in dialogue. They're getting into groups and going out and talking to people. And I think on Facebook and on Google Plus and in these conversations and hangouts, it is slow work. But I myself have had my positions changed, and I've changed other people's positions, and we've grown together. And I've seen that really, really work. It's a small scale, and it seems like nothing's getting done, but those people vote. In America, those people vote, and that's how you get shit done at the federal level. That's how you get pressure on politicians to change gun laws. First, you have to deal with a gun culture in America where people have legitimate arguments that they have for why the Second Amendment shouldn't be different, or why there shouldn't be an amendment to it, or why there shouldn't be tighter regulations. Not that I want any of those things, or I'm saying they're efficacious. I'm saying that if you want to actualize that type of change, it's through dialogue. It's through persuading people that the positions they hold aren't the case and shouldn't be what they believe.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, you're making a case that even just sitting here in Google Hangouts and talking civilly with people and trying to understand their perspective and showing them that you understand their perspective can constitute doing shit in the way that Fabio was discussing. And I think I do agree with that.
Yeah, I also think that, again, the way systems work is the one little tick is going to create a huge change at some point in time, but prior to that, it is a very agonizing, frustrating, and slow process. To change a paradigm, I think, is a lot of hard work, followed by all of a sudden you make that change. So I think that's the business we're in, and I don't know what the alternative is.
Well, the alternative is we just let things go the way they are, and nothing ever changes, and we end up blowing ourselves up. I mean, that to me isn't an option. I want to live for another 100 years if I can, but I want to be around. I want my grandkids to have somewhere to live. I want them to be able to enjoy a life better than the one I've had. That's not asking too much, and that's not out of the realm of possibility, but we really have to change the way my generation thinks, because it has not been good.
I was just going to say that along those lines, I mean, even when I think about the last year or two, you have Ozzy up in northern Ontario making videos every once in a while. He's only made maybe a dozen, and he's in Hangouts and whatnot. But my thinking changed radically as I listened to that, and then I went out and read some more, and I exposed myself to some of the sources he'd recommend. And that one guy had a huge impact, and I know he's had impact on other people. And it's small. It's relatively small, given that there are, in the U.S. alone, there are 320 million people, right? So it's a lot of minds to fence. But that's something. There's my influence now. I've had my beliefs revised, and I've gone ahead. And it's more. It's not about that he taught. Like his videos aren't about atheism per se. Like a lot of them are about how to think about thinking, and having better belief-forming processes. And this is a little bit of what I was talking about earlier, is that if you can help people to think more critically, and they will inevitably come to better beliefs. Not even yours. I'm not even saying that you need to convince them of yours. It's convincing them that there are good ways to think about things and to develop beliefs, and there are ways that you can form bad beliefs with bad practices, and encouraging them to do it to do the right thing. And I think that actually can actually apply to a number of issues. Then somebody walks away and they think about the gun debate, or they think about abortion, or they think about welfare, or they think about any topic, and all of a sudden they're applying these belief-forming practices that maybe they've refined a little bit more, and maybe coming to better conclusions. So maybe it's kind of getting to the tools that people are using rather than trying to convince them of any particular subject. Maybe that has a bit bigger spread.
I agree. And that's one of those things that's sadly lacking. What did you want to know, Helena?
I was interested, you said kind of as an aside, sort of like my generation has failed, and there are things that the way we tried to do things that weren't good, and it seems like you've got a lot of hope in the millennials in that they won't do those things. I was curious, maybe you could flesh out what those things are that you think the previous generation... Yeah.
It's sort of along the lines of what I was saying. Like, I grew up very parochial. My world was here. Everything revolved in this little area. Like, where I live, I grew up in Winnipeg, which is literally 500 miles from everything. Minneapolis is 500 miles, Regina's 500 miles. Anything I want to do is 500 miles away. So you grow up with a mentality that you're not connected to anybody, just you. You've got your little thing and you live in isolation. That's a failure to acknowledge that there's a world around us. As we've grown, all this communication, this interconnectedness has come about. And this is something that we failed to grasp. As we had no awareness that we could actually care what went on in Sydney, Australia right now. So the failure of our generation was we had an idea that this stuff was there. Like, we went to the moon when I was a kid, and we saw and looked back and, well, there's a world out there. But we didn't connect the dots, and our dots stayed isolated. And today's kids, my kids, see those connections as, well, what do you mean? Well,
right, so they feel much less powerless. Whereas when you grew up, those was just these little bitty enclaves, and you only found out about what stuff happened. You didn't feel that you had a way to
absolutely
change what it was that was going to happen.
That's right.
I mean, that resonates with me in that I was telling to we went to Germany this summer with the family, and I remember telling my kids about when I was in high school and we had Russian or Soviet exchange students at our school who came for a couple of weeks. And we were just trying to find out, what is it like over there? What's it like living over there? And in 89, 90, or I guess it was 90, when the revolution was occurring and things were falling apart in the Soviet Union.
I was there.
And we were waiting for information. You had no clue what was going on. And so it's a little bit of, I mean, if you take the exchange student example, today I can go on the internet and I can find out about how people think, or I can get exposure to how people think in Russia. I couldn't have done that back then. And it wasn't just because it was the Soviet Union. It was because it was on the other side of the world, and we didn't have all of these we had some satellites that, but you'd have reporters calling, right? And like calling in news, and you'd be finding out about it on delay, right? So it was very different. It was a much bigger world than it is now.
Absolutely. And I think, getting back to what you were asking, Helen, like, the failure of my generation is we could have, back in the 70s, we had access to some of this stuff. We knew, we didn't embrace it the way it's been embraced. We were just kind of reluctant. We didn't want to change. I live in this little tiny city, but, it's okay. I don't want what's out there. Just let me have my little world stay the way it is. That's a failure to connect. And that, my generation, that's the price we're paying, is the kids have had to struggle to get past our reluctance. Go ahead, Cliff, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think there's two questions. Number one, it seems like the people in this room can actually have a dialogue with each other, which is good. I think an interesting question is why. But two other interesting question is, what do we do if we hit an area that we're polar opposites on something which each of us finds critically important, like a big issue, like abortion? And a third question is, what do we do with people that have an almost violent opposition to dialogue? Do we ignore those people and concentrate on the people we can talk to? Or do we attempt to have some type of dialogue with people who can be extremely difficult to have a dialogue with?
Can I bite off number two, just because it's fresh on my mind, is that on the topic of big issues, and incompatibilities, like fundamental incompatibilities with the rest of society, it's a really tough position. Like I think to some degree you're seeing us really struggle with what to do with Islam right now, where it's not. I mean, there's to some level it is ISIS and radical militants, but there's a decent size of that group that aren't moderate. They're not militant, but they hold views that are counter to societal well-being in terms of the diminishing of women and the suppression of women and the brutal punishments for being homosexual. There's mass oppression there. It is a society that I'd say most of the world does not want to live under, and it's becoming, as for instance, gay marriage is getting passed in the United States and in other countries. It's starting to pull apart a little bit, right? You're starting to see quite a separation between those countries and other Western countries, or I'm not even sure how to. I don't want to put that just as Western countries, but countries who are not rooted in those ideas, and that's a really difficult position. I don't know. In the case of ISIS, obviously we're doing something about it. But if you go into America now, and you have Christians who, there's going to be some that make that journey and who become more liberal, and you're seeing that with some churches. But you're going to see some fundamentalist churches dig in, and you might see some more action of the kind that we saw in Planned Parenthood. You might actually see it might come to a point where they feel so strongly about it, and it's so they feel so disenfranchised that they might. I mean, they could militarize, or they could have more radical groups that are willing to act on those and feel that it's their duty to. And I think that's really tough. And I think the ultimate explanation, at least for the moderates or for the non-militarized, is to try to persuade them out of it. You can't kill them, and your only option is if that's a belief that you think is corrosive to society, you need to persuade those people out of it. That's through dialogue and through cultural infusion or erosion. So undermining it, essentially, undermining the ideology.
I think you bring up a really good point, that we need to get close enough so that we build enough interdependency too, so that the cost of being enemies is greater than the value of being friends. I mean that is the real question from my point of view, is how do we get to that point where we recognize that, you know, we swim in the same pond. We need to do that, and there are people that don't hold those ideologies. In fact, they hold ideologies that are diametrically opposed to that. I don't know how to build that bridge, but I know we need to, or we're going to be in a world of shit, to quote the famous people in this room.
Cliff raised a really interesting point, I think, you know, especially the last one, when he said, how do you deal with people that basically don't want to deal with you? And I think that the answer is it depends on what kind of ideology they are proposing. I'll make an example. I will never ever discussion with a Nazi. Never. I will never ever debate with a Nazi. I will never accept a discussion with a Nazi. I will never do that. And I'll tell you more, I'll do as much as I can for him not to speak. The reason is really simple. If I engage in a discussion with a Nazi, I'm engaging in a discussion with someone whose view of the world is that I will not be allowed to speak. So I am not allowing him to speak in this context. There is no way in hell he's going to have a discussion, and if I can, he will not be speaking. There is no way you can ever speak with those people. I'm talking about Nazi, you can talk about any kind of fundamentalist. I don't care, you know, hardcore communists, you know, people from ISIS, I don't care. You simply cannot have a conversation with them. And we got to shut them off. I don't see any other point. Cliff knows that more because he's from Europe. The thing we've got to remember is that if history has taught us something, is that Nazis and fascists didn't have a coup d'etat. They didn't march on the parliament and got the power. They were elected, democratically elected, with the same mechanism that we all agree to share and live on. So we have to develop these antibodies to these kind of behaviors, and that goes, and this is the same with conversation and trying to meet people. And this is why I said at the beginning, if you want to build a bridge, you got to give up something. I mean, you got to put yourself in a state of mind that you've got to give up something. I cannot have any bridges built with someone which has no intention at all to give up anything.
What you're saying amounts to, at least in America, in these sort of, non-important, if you will, dialogues. You're talking about no platforming, right? That's that expression. That what you are advocating that we should have that somehow a no platforming policy should be enacted. Well, I don't like that because. Well, several reasons. First of all, I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think that they're putting people, giving people who have these kinds of views that you're discussing a platform, exposes the way they think to other people, and exposes it in such a way that people can see the flaws in it.
Why should I give a platform to someone which, if he had his way, I will not be allowed to have a platform?
Because in general, there's something wrong about no platforming people, sort of, period, right? That's the instinctive response I have. Like, you just don't want to no platform people. It's not right. There's something wrong about it.
What I would offer is that I'm not sure. So there are ideas that are pernicious, right? There are ideas that are hostile, and if they were pervasive, it would be detrimental in a severe way. And Nazism obviously is something akin to that. But when it comes down to it, an irrational belief is simply just an irrational belief. It's something that, like, I was a fundamentalist. I went to pro-life rallies. I got hit with an egg in the back as a car drove by and nailed me with it. And I had Bible studies with gay students who I was trying to persuade them out of the idea that being gay was okay. And if I could go back in time, I'd punch myself in the face. But the way I came out of that was through people talking to me. And I was not necessarily rational at the time, where I could have there could be people who could look at me and go, look, I can't talk to that guy. I was no less outspoken than I am now. But because people did speak to me, I came out of those ideas. That's not going to be the case often, but it's the case enough that I think it's worthwhile to have that. And I don't know, I'm a little with Helena in this, in that, and certainly I want to be sensitive within Europe. And I visited friends in Germany for 3 weeks, and they were East Germans before the wall came down, and they had very different views of things, and obviously had a history there where they won't tolerate certain ideas, or they won't tolerate certain ways of talking about things, and that's based on their past. It's based on their cultural sensitivity to their own past. But it seems to me like a bit of a bad direction to go, only in that I would hope that good ideas can triumph over bad ideas, just empirically or from a point of reason.
I'm sorry. That's fine. It would be cool if it were true. It is not true. It doesn't work like that in any field of human, anywhere. In economy, it doesn't work like that. Bad money chases away the good money. I mean, it's just the way it is. So, and again, if we value an open platform to speak, we should not allow any ideas which, if put in power, they will not allow that.
Well, I don't think we don't owe anyone equal time. That's not what I'm advocating.
No. There's some people which we don't owe them any time.
Right. I would say that I don't have any problem with a media channel not airing the ideas of someone who wants to air them. I think that we don't have to give them soapboxes to speak from, but I don't know that we shouldn't be talking to them. There's a difference there, I see.
Okay, what? I'll ask you, the same question, I asked before. Why should I allow someone to talk about his ideas that, if put in place, will not allow me to speak about my ideas? Why should I do that?
You probably talk to people on G+ who at some point in their lives wouldn't have given you that opportunity either, and somebody persuaded them out of that, right?
I'm not talking about allowing people to speak. I'm talking about what they're going to say, what they do, what the message they're giving out.
What I was speaking to is it sounded like you wouldn't have a dialogue with them.
I will never have a dialogue with someone which his idea is it's fascism. I will never do that.
Yeah,
I will fight for him not to have any kind of platform at all.
If everyone was to take on that attitude, he would never be persuaded out of those beliefs.
I don't care. It's not my problem. No. Listen, no. I agree with you. That's right. You're right. It will never be persuaded. So what? Fuck it. Tough shit. It's not my duty to persuade people out of their ideas. My only duty is to speak up my ideas in the democratic contest.
Yeah,
and this is what the democratic contest should do. I mean, we have to develop antibodies to that kind of behavior. But I'm talking about democratic process. But what I'm really talking about is any human interaction. We have to develop antibodies because of those kind of behaviors. That's the only way. And again, I know I sound like a broken record, but Cliff, put a comment on the side because again, unfortunately, he knows what I'm talking about. The worst ideas were put in place by democratic process. This is where the democratic process failed. This is where giving an equal platform to any kind of fucked up idea fails miserably. Because if they ever get in public, for any kind of reason, there might be an economic recession where people, follow the strong leader. There might be, I don't know, a cultural crisis, where all the values of a given society are, blown away, and there is this new one which gets in. There might be any kind of scenarios. But if the end result of that scenario, of that kind of ideology, is that people will be less free on a general basis to speak up their mind, they should not be allowed to be fulfilled or to be spoken about in a democratic society. That's.
Yeah, these are minefields in terms of conversation, and also really how to move forward. I hear your point, Fabio. I'm wondering if there is some sort of a way that we could maybe differentiate between defending against something that actually would destroy a free and open society and being offensive towards those elements that you kind of have to tolerate at the fringe in order to have that free society. That's a tough balance to strike, and I think that's what, if I'm not mistaken, that's what Bert was bringing up, and Helena, that we have to actually give some sort of a platform, but no, I think that having a platform to express ideas and having levers on the policy and buttons that actually steer the mechanisms by which a society operates is a different story.
I totally agree. The problem is that these ideas, they thrive on that kind of platform. The reason that those ideas get a foot in the society is because they thrive on the open platform. So my question is, where the fuck does it end? There is really, the problem is that historically there isn't really a common denominator for those ideas. We've seen that kind of scenarios in through the centuries with different backgrounds, in societies with different backgrounds, different beliefs, different parts of the world, different history, and that's the common denominator, And again, I'm all with you. I wish we could do that. I wish. The fact of the matter is that I don't know if it's because the way we are built as human beings, as human species, the kind of society we set up. The problem is that it doesn't work like that. And again, take any book in economics. You will see that it's there. There's plenty of examples. The bad money chases away. When you are in a recession, you got bad money. Money which is has got a lot of inflation and stuff like that. They will chase away the good money. And this happens, with ideas too. If you are in a society, the only thing which matters is how the ideas appeal, and they appeal.
Don't you think there's a difference though between regulating? So I agree with you that we put in regulations in order to ensure fair business or to actualize some set of conditions that we want, that we realize that greed will take over and it will push us a direction we don't want to go. But in terms of ideas, those are held by individuals, right? People have ideas, and those aren't going anywhere. So I don't know how you deal with that in society. It's not that I want to give them a platform or whatever, but if you have people if people were to adopt a posture of not engaging with those people, how would they ever come to be persuaded that things were otherwise?
It's interesting because I probably am a little further in the other way, even more than you, Bert, because I want to give them a platform. Period. I do.
Again, my point is that how do you persuade that it's a bad idea? And again, my point is tough shit. I don't. Okay, the social contract we live in, states that you should not be able to do that. Let me make a counterexample, Bert. You talk about communism before. How did communism fail? Did it fail because some better idea sprout up in Russia, or did it fail because of economic reasons and and stuff? So it wasn't replaced by a better idea. It just failed because it crumbled.
It fell apart because of itself.
Yeah, but it didn't fail because it was a bad ideology. Nazis in Germany, they didn't fail because it was a bad ideology. They failed because they lost the war. And probably if they didn't try, to invade Russia, they wouldn't have failed, that easily, and they would probably stay there.
I don't know. I think that I think that there's something to societies built on flawed systems will eventually there's a reason why there would be a flawed system, or why they would be something that would be inefficacious, or something that wouldn't be sustained. There's a reason why civilizations move along a vector, right? We don't stone people anymore in some places.
Yeah,
we don't,
yeah.
Right.
You gotta be careful with that, because
but those are the people that we're talking about. That those societies are not. They're not healthy. They're not thriving. They're not thriving the way that other societies who have moved beyond that have. So it's not that.
In Saudi Arabia, they thrive pretty much right now, and they stone people.
I don't know if it's everybody thriving, is it?
Oh,
But
if you go
they're
there,
thriving on the back of a natural resource. They're not thriving on a cultivation of a mutually beneficial engine.
yeah, but they're thriving anyway,
Well, no. Well, thriving. It's not just economics, right? You have. I don't see them as a hotbed for science, for instance, or for. They have half their population that they don't listen to. Women aren't contributing anything, right?
Yeah.
So there are flaws in that, and there's a reason why I think that there are flourishing societies and societies that flourish less, right? I think there's a point to there is progress in cultures and civilizations, and there are better ones than others, right?
Yeah, the problem with if and better than me, the problem when you start raising there is progress is that according to your society. So you see, it's really tough. And again, I don't want to play the devil's advocate here, but it is really difficult. you know, and that's the difficulty that, you know, we started the conversation before, you know. If we try to find, you know, a common ground, that might be even, you know, that might be the best conversation stopper ever, because we will never start talking with each other. Yeah.
In regards to giving everybody a platform, I mean, are we actually wanting to appeal hate speech laws? I mean, are there some ideas that are that destructive that even giving them a platform causes enough of an offense that it overrides the freedom that you would naturally want someone to voice an opinion?
This is the rationale behind most of the laws in Europe against the Nazi and fascism, where you cannot publicly state, you know, deny Holocaust, or, you know, just glorify Nazi and fascist party. This is the rationale behind those laws. And I spoke with a lot, you know, people from the US. They see that as an infringement of free speech. Well, it isn't. I'm sorry, it just isn't.
Well, it would be in the United States, though.
It would be. No, you're right. No.
I think the reason why, and it just I think Helena maybe stepped away, and if you haven't, feel free to speak up. But I think the reason she might take that position is that, and I to some degree feel this way myself, is that give them put it on air and let the merits just defeat it. I
think the difference now and the 40s and 50s is, like I was talking about earlier. Our world is here. Our world isn't news flicks and news reels. Our world is instant. And bad ideas like Josh Furr, whatever his name is, they disappeared. These guys are just taken out of control. They're taken right out.
I'm sorry, James. I'm sorry to interrupt you. It just isn't. Please, book a plane and go to Russia right now.
I was in Russia.
There you go. So you know what I'm talking about.
Actually, the day before Gorbachev disappeared.
No. I'm talking about go to Russia now.
I think his point was that those ideas are accessible, right? Wasn't that your point?
Exactly. People can find out what bad ideas look like very instantaneously, just like that. You go, well, what does that word mean? And you look it up and you go, oh shit, I don't believe that, and they throw it out. I mean, this is one of the mistakes that our generation made. We hold too dearly to the things we think are right, and now kids they live on this thing, and everything that we need to know is there. And if somebody comes up with a story, go ahead, Bert.
It is true. There's a platform for them right now, right, that we can't do anything about. I see there are certain people who we are familiar with who have are posting things that are conspiracies or other things that are built. Some of them are built on outright lies and poor, shoddy evidence. But there are people who find them persuasive, and there are people who think the Earth is flat. I mean, good grief. So Nazism and other things, there are avenues for people to find out about this stuff. I don't know that I agree in that. I don't know that I'd repeal hate speech laws, although I've always had a problem because I would prefer that we treat how it manifests and treat that as a crime rather than that somebody's expressed a certain opinion or whatever.
If hate speech laws are a bit of an on or off thing, how about harassment and verbal bullying laws? How come I don't have the right to harass and verbally bully someone and claim that's just my freedom of speech, to tell them that they're ugly, to tell them that it shouldn't be here, to tell them every time that I see them that they don't belong in the same place as me, that they're not worthy to be in this school, that they're not worthy to sit in the same class with me, that they need to go home, that they're dirty, that nobody likes them? How can't I claim that as my freedom of speech? Would anyone in this room actually defend my right to continuously harass someone? For me and Fabio to both continuously harass someone day in and day out? And would anyone say, well, you've got a right, it's your freedom of speech, it's your platform to tell them that they're ugly, to tell them that they're not worth to work in the same environment to you, to tell them they're not even the same class of citizenship? Would anyone actually defend that we have the right to do that to some person day in and day out?
Well, there's some of those things aren't illegal though. Somebody can go down on my front on public property and pick at me for being ugly, and there's nothing illegal about that. In terms of schools and things like that, they have rules and regulations for the school that they can act upon. hate speech, at least in the United States, comes into effect when it accompanies an act, and so you can have a hate crime essentially for doing something motivated by prejudice, essentially. But that's pretty much it. You can go down and pick at somebody's home and say their kid's ugly.
There are harassment laws, and there are bullying laws, and they're outside of school, right? You can harass someone by phone, you can harass someone by email.
Yeah, I think the only way we're ever going to really resolve the issues, and I know that this is not I'm not saying that this can happen right away, but it is the only direction that I can see that is viable, is to ultimately cultivate commitment to have a mutual stake in each other's success rather than get compliance, because people who hate will find a way to express that hatred. People who feel that others need to be dominated are going to try to find ways to make that domination happen. People that are willing to entertain all kinds of suffering and pain, needless suffering and pain on the heels of apathy, are going to be apathetic and bury their heads. So ultimately we need to cultivate this notion that we do all swim in the same pond, and the more that we have an interest in each other's success, the better off we're all going to be. You know, that whole, I hate to use cliche terms, but they're all I got. It's due to a lack of creativity, but the rising tide raising all boats kind of a thing, I think applies in that situation. So, and I also think that ideologies are just the clothing on the emotional climate. It's the reason that we have Westboro Baptist and Presbyterians coming out of the same book, that the people are raised in a certain emotional climate, and they learn how to react and treat other people, and then they just use that superficial ideology as the blah blah that comes along with that mean and brutish behavior, or kind and kind-hearted and loving behavior. So I do think that ultimately behavior is the real coin of the realm, and that ideology will kind of be caught in a backdraft on that. So
I just wanted to point out that I am open. I'm not so entrenched in this that I'm not willing to be persuaded otherwise. I think Fabio and Cliff, you guys probably have very different experiences than I do in your respective countries or in your exposure, that were I to have the same experiences, I may see things the same. So I admit that it's a rather, it could potentially be a naive and idealistic approach, but I'm trying to figure out what the end result of that is.
Well, one thing that I'll openly admit is that the solution that I think is necessary in some cases, I don't like the solution. I think it's an ugly solution, but I don't know what other solution it is. Like, imagine someone who comes into this hangout right now, and they start getting violently in their verbiage. They start muting people, and they start blocking people. If we don't do something, the hangout is disrupted. It's over. They'll start kicking people from the hangout, they'll mute people, they'll overtalk them, and the hangout will be destroyed. What's the solution set? Like, yes, you can try to have a dialogue, but we can all name people that we've tried over and over again. Like, Joe Creason is on Google+. He's one of the nicest people I've ever seen. He's soft-spoken, he tries to understand people, and I've seen him, like, he's way nicer than I am. I'm not very nice at all, but that dude is, like, a really nice guy. And I've seen him run into people, and he just rage quit, because he's like, I can't deal with this, and I'm going to just self-destruct, so he leaves. But that guy then destroys the whole room, and the whole room shuts down, and everyone leaves, because there's one guy just being completely violent. I think that's a very ugly problem, and I don't know. I'd love for the solution to be, let's have a dialogue, let's have a conversation, and they will accept some kind of rationality. I don't think that works all the time. I think there's a practical realization that some people might not be able to be convinced. I don't think, that's our default as soon as we encounter somebody. But if you have someone who has a violent mentality opposing freedom, is giving them freedom resolution?
Yeah, I think the point that you're bringing up, and the real key that I picked up that I think is a centerpiece, is that while you don't like the solution, you don't have a better one. Like, the whole palette of options is crappy, and you're saying, wait a minute, we have to pick the least crappy one, because if we don't draw the line there, the entire cooperative thing breaks apart, and no one can do anything.
Yeah, I think I understand, like, with Fabio. I mean, I know very little about the real ramifications of what happened in your country after the war. I mean, you read snippets of it, and I'm pretty sure that we got a pretty watered down version of what went on. But the reality of it is you guys had to put these laws into place to protect yourselves from this stuff happening again, because the conditions that gave rise to this stuff didn't change for years afterwards. And if they go back to that place, yeah, that's a possibility. And I think that's the point you're trying to make. And I think it comes down to how we view ourselves in context of everybody around us. Like, Americans have a way of looking at rights. We have these rights guaranteed by the Constitution. We have our ability to be who we are, to do what we want. All these things guaranteed by this statement of articles written 200 and something years ago. Well, not every country has that. I have one that's not quite the same, but we have what, as a Canadian, I'm able to do, and I can do some things. My Bill of Rights is different than yours, Fabio. And you sound Irish, Cliff. I might be wrong, but you guys have a different standard of what it means to have rights as a citizenship. So this is why I'm trying to propose, is there something, we're talking really tough questions, like, can we get beyond these divisions and find things that bring us together? It's difficult. I never said this was an easy discussion. It is an interesting discussion, because we've got people here, like Cliff, you were saying, we can talk about this stuff. We don't, because we're invested in it, but we can talk. And that's why, like Joe said on the side, we picked very specific people for this discussion, because we wanted to have the dialogue. That was the point of all of this, of having a rational discourse. And of course, Fabio, you got a little passionate there, but it's who you are, and that's why you're here, because we need to hear that other voice and that style of voice, because we're just different. And that's my point exactly. In our differences, we have to have an understanding that we're all basically the same.
And can I point out that it's these very principles that I want to see actualized in societies. I think I don't think Helena and I, for instance, are dogmatic on this issue. I think we're open to revising our position and hearing from Fabio and his experience and learning from that. And I think that those are the types of things that we need to have to try to resolve some of the problems as much as we can on our local level, going out into the internet and having an exchange of ideas and encouraging people out of their dogmatism, and also ourselves not being dogmatic. I really think that's a pretty key bit, because I might take on Fabio's position. I might reconsider it, give it some thought, move away from something I held to that I learned that maybe I'm wrong about, or maybe I'm right. Maybe I dig in a little bit and I find out that in fact that no, I've got some pretty good reasons for this, and maybe I should have a follow-up discussion with Fabio or whatever, right?
Yeah. So all right. So we've really covered a lot of intractable problems, but I do think that there are some practical things that we can do to make sure that each of us as individuals can actually go out there and make the point in some way, shape, or form that people matter. And I think that there are people would wake up if they saw some act of kindness. So I do think that there are certain things that we can do just right off the bat as we continue to work out how do we handle the big problems. There is some low-hanging fruit. There are some obvious things that we can do.
I think in some cases we need to realize that some things, and I believe you said this earlier before, that small things that we think we do can have far-reaching effects, and I don't think we should ever underestimate what positive action should have. I like to volunteer at least 10 to 20 hours a week to teach various subjects, and a week or so ago one of the students who was really struggling in math had started to come around, and they mentioned to me that they had started to help some of the other people, that they're their friends and stuff now. And you just start to think about what that, if it expands, could create. And it's like a half an hour you've interacted with them a couple of times, something that was absolutely trivial for you. And you've turned somebody around who was failing a subject, who now doesn't see it as a nightmare, who looks forward to it, and it's actually starting to teach other people. Like, that can easily spiral into a much larger effect than you had. So I think that's one of the things. And I mean, it's hard. That's all I'm saying. It's hard to undervalue positive things. Like when you have a hangout like this, and Helena had a hangout a while ago on free will and determinism that was so dramatically different from many of the hangouts on G+. And I started to think to myself, why am I in these other hangouts? Like, what is the positive benefit? Like, there are really good places where you can go and have discussions with people, and we can simply focus our efforts to where we are directly productive.
I agree. And, you know, the last couple of weeks, I've been watching some very, very good hangouts. And that's kind of why I've been changing my thinking from, like, let's get away from this trivial stuff and talk about things that really we can actually make a difference with. And that's kind of what, you know, Joe and I were talking about, and that's where the idea for this comes from. And hopefully, you know, this will be the first of many. I mean, if nothing else, give people a platform to speak these things that really nobody ever really wants to really talk about without yelling and screaming at each other and saying, well, you're wrong and going to hell. Like, that's not going to accomplish anything.
Just riffing off of something Cliff said, and I had written this earlier in the chat, and Joe had asked if I would share it. It goes along the lines of when I was talking about some of the individuals who post these videos to YouTube that challenge the way that I think. And what I was noticing about that as I was just saying it was that that influenced not only my interactions on Google+, but it influences my interactions with my kids and how I raise my kids. It influences my interactions at work. I supervise artists, and I have better thinking processes because I'm thinking more about how I think. And that's inevitably helping in terms of forming true beliefs and in terms of having good interactions with individuals on giving benefit of the doubt and having openness and a willingness to revise my positions. And that didn't come from an atheist YouTube clip, or that didn't come from a debate. That came from a video that challenged the way that I think at my core level. And so it could be that, and that, if you notice, that permeates through my life. My kids are picking up some of those habits. They're learning to think from me because I'm learning to think from someone else. And I think there's a nice butterfly effect there, similar to what Cliff was saying, where it has a spread, and so it's finding ways that you can have that type of influence. So.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that it's those small acts that can end up being really, really big things. And you know, I got to say that I share your affinity for what you got from Ozzy too. He does acts of kindness, enormous kindness, for people that use the axiom of thinking through things in order to govern their behaviors in life, and I have learned a lot from him.
Yeah, if you take Christopher Maudi's Meeting of the Minds, was a great series of very civil discussions, and I've learned and modeled myself a little bit on that. I saw that as being effective, as being something worthwhile and engaging in, and that spreads, right? And so it's how you conduct yourself. It doesn't have to be anything profound, but you can have real impact.
Mm-hmm.
I hate Ozzy, and Christopher is a moron. And I say that because I know he's listening. I don't know about Ozzy, but I know that Moat is listening, and he's a bloody moron.
Fabio, you're Italian, so you do take pineapple on your pizza. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I do what?
Take pineapple on your pizza.
We're calling a pineapple pizza for you right now.
Yeah, you do that. Assholes.
All right, well, thanks everybody for... Bert, anything else?
Yeah, I just want to make one note. Cliff, is awfully. He's like Bigfoot at Hangouts. You get this little glimpse every once in a while.
Yeah, but he has a big foot. All right, well, thanks everybody for watching, listening, joining in, and all that. I'm going to take it off air, and we hope to do this again. See you later.